Hey Sugar Spun Bakers, it's Sam, and today on Sugar Spun Run, we'll be making quiche Lorraine. Traditionally with quiche, you start with making a short crust pastry. If you have a recipe you love, you can absolutely do that, but I personally love to use my homemade pie dough, so that's what I'm using today. It just has a really nice flavor, it's super easy to work with, and it complements the quiche very nicely. So I have one pie dough. If you have a pre-made one, you could use that instead, but I am just going to roll this out into my quiche pan. Now this pie dough has chilled, just like my recipe states. I'll make sure to link to that in case you are also making yours from scratch. And one other thing I'd like to note, typically when I am making a pie dough for a savory recipe, I don't add the sugar. You could, I just don't always. It won't make your quiche sweet if you do. Don't be afraid to use as much flour as you need. Anytime I'm working with pastry on my countertop, I will use a spatula to scrape underneath just to make sure it's not sticking. I don't use a chilled marble pastry board to make my pastry. That would help with any sticking, but this works pretty well for me. It's pretty low maintenance. Now let's take a moment to talk about the pan we'll be baking our quiche Lorraine in. This is a 9.5-inch quiche pan. It is much deeper than your traditional tart pan that has a removable bottom. Those are too shallow. If you opt for one of those, you're going to have leftover filling that you'll need to discard. This one is about 1.5 inches deep. You need yours to be at least that deep. If you don't have a quiche pan and you don't want to waste any of the filling, use a 9 or 9.5-inch pie plate instead. That will work just as well. Now I'm just going to roll up my pie crust. Drop it right into my tart pan. Oops. A little bit of adjustment needed. And I'll just form this to my tart pan. All right, this looks perfect, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to toss it in the freezer. Once I put it in the freezer, I'm going to start my oven preheating to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and I will let this chill until the oven is at 400 degrees. Once your quiche crust has chilled and your oven is preheated, make sure it's actually completely preheated, we're going to grab some parchment paper. I've crinkled this up, usually just ball it up. This makes it easier to have it sit nice and close to the pie crust. So I'll add my parchment, and then I'm going to add my pie weights. We're going to take this over to the center rack of our preheated oven where it's going to need to bake for 15 minutes. Now, after 15 minutes, we will very carefully remove the pie weights, make sure you have somewhere to place them. And at this point, I like to take a little bit of egg wash and just brush the bottom and sides of the pie crust. And to make your egg wash, it's just 1 egg mixed with about a teaspoon of water. Had I been thinking a little bit more clearly, I also would have pricked the bottom of the pie crust with a fork at this point. But fortunately, this recipe is pretty forgiving. And then I'll pop it back in the oven for another 8 minutes or until the bottom is beginning to turn a nice light golden brown. All right, once this is out of the oven, we are going to not turn off our oven. We're just going to reduce the heat to 375. We'll set the crust aside and we'll start preparing our filling, which actually comes together so quickly. We're going to head over to the stovetop where we're going to begin by cooking our bacon. By definition, quiche Lorraine must include bacon. We are using 4 strips. Now, I have cut these into pieces before cooking them, just because that's my preference, but if you want to just cook the strips and then crumble them afterwards, that would be fine as well. So I have my stovetop set to medium heat and I'm just going to cook this bacon until it's nice and crisp. All right, once the bacon is cooked through, we are going to remove it to a paper towel lined plate to help drain off any excess grease. And we're going to drain all but 1 tablespoon of the bacon grease. We're not done on the stovetop yet. Next, you're going to need about a 1/2 cup of finely chopped yellow onion. We'll add this to the pan, and we're going to cook this until it's softened. This adds a really nice flavor to the quiche. Now, not every quiche Lorraine recipe will use onion or garlic, which I'm also about to add, but I really like it for the added flavor, and I'm not going for a true purist recipe. I am going for my personal best version of quiche Lorraine. This recipe was also requested by me via email. I want to thank Mary Jo for asking for it. And this is just a reminder, if there's a recipe you would like to see here, please send me an email, send me your request, leave me a comment. I always write down any recipes people ask for and try to fit them into my schedule. Sometimes it does take me a while to get to them though, but I always try. And cooking these veggies in the baking grease just adds so much flavor. It's really so good. Once the onion's nice and softened, I like to add some minced garlic. This is a teaspoon of garlic. Again, I'm all about adding that depth of flavor to any dish that I make, so I highly recommend that you add garlic. We're just going to cook this for about 30-45 seconds until it's nice and fragrant. This smells amazing. We'll take this off the heat. All right, now for the rest of our filling, we're going to start with 1.5 cups of heavy cream. A quick note on this, I like to use all heavy cream because it makes a nice, thick, creamy egg custard base. If you would like, you can substitute half of the heavy cream for whole milk instead. It will lighten it up a little bit. It won't be quite as dense and creamy, but it will still be good. Now, of course, a quiche needs eggs, so we are going to be adding 4 large eggs, and I like to do everything just right in a large measuring cup. Saves a dish. Number 4. For our seasoning, we'll add a half teaspoon of table salt, 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper, and I also love to add a pinch of nutmeg. This is just an 1/8 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. It's often added to quiches. It really does add a nice depth of flavor. If you hate nutmeg, you could leave it out though. We are also going to add a few dashes of Tabasco sauce. I usually add about 3 to 5. If I can get the lid off, which, there we go. That was almost embarrassing. So I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4. One of those was a little heavy, which is fine with me. If you don't have Tabasco sauce, you could add a pinch of cayenne pepper instead. We'll whisk everything together. I want to make sure the eggs are well broken up. This makes such a nice brunch option or breakfast option. I'll make sure to include some notes on preparing it in advance too. That way you can do all the heavy lifting the day before, and then you can easily bake and serve it for like a holiday breakfast or something like that. Okay, assembly time. Let's bring back our quiche crust, which you can see I have placed on a foil-lined baking sheet. This is just going to make it easier to transfer the quiche, catch any spills if they were to happen. You can even put it on the baking sheet when you are just making the crust. It makes it easier to get it in and out of the oven. Before we add the filling, we're going to add our bacon. I'm going to crumble it just a little bit further. Just sprinkle it all over the bottom. Next, we need our cheese. Okay, I know we're going to have some purists out there saying, oh, you don't need cheese for quiche Lorraine. Sure, you don't need it, but for a really good quiche Lorraine, you really should use it. I'm using 4 ounces of cheese. Gruyere is a common choice and it works really well here. I also like to add a little bit of parmesan, so I'll use like 3 to 3.5 ounces of Gruyere. And I will also use 1/2 ounce to 1 ounce of Parmesan cheese. That's my preference. Some people also will make this with like cheddar cheese. I think that would be fine. Cheddar cheese and eggs go great together. That would be delicious. So I wouldn't use a cheese like mozzarella or anything like that, but really any hard cheese that you enjoy with eggs would work well here. We're going to also add our onion and garlic. I'm going to try to scatter this a bit because you don't want it all in one place. It smells amazing. It's not even cooked yet. So much flavor from the bacon, the onion, the garlic. Again, this isn't the most pure version of quiche Lorraine ever invented, but personally I think it's the best one. Otherwise I wouldn't be sharing it. All right, last step is our filling. I'm going to give it one more quick whisk, and we'll just pour this over everything. It smells so good. I'm so excited about this. All right, off we go to our 375-degree Fahrenheit preheated oven. We're going to bake this in the center rack, and it's going to need to cook for about 35 minutes. You'll know it's done when the edges are set, but the center is still a little bit jiggly, and if you insert a sharp knife into the center, it should come out clean. Keep in mind that if you are using a tart pan and all of the filling doesn't fit and you had to discard some of that, your quiche is going to be done sooner. Let's give this a little jiggle so you can see what I'm talking about. Go ahead and use our knife. This quiche is finished. We're just going to let it sit for about 15 minutes before we cut into it. Okay, once it's had a little bit of time to set, we can go ahead and dig in. Now, I'm always really bad at cutting. The first slice always comes out so messy. So don't judge me on my first cut. No one watched too closely. Oh my gosh, this smells so good. Go ahead and plate it. And that is how you make quiche Lorraine. If you try this, please let me know what you think. If you think cheese doesn't belong in it, I don't need to hear from you, but the rest of you, I really look forward to hearing what you think. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh man, it's my favorite part of the job. This is so good. Like, so good. I don't know what that means. Okay, and then boom, bacon. No one watched too closely. You can't because I keep putting my head in front of the camera.